Doesn't that seem significant that Trump has just broken a record for most airstrikes in Somalia in a single year? And nobody's even
Yeah.
talking about it. We're not debating, oh, should we escalate this war that we're involved in, where there are U.S. troops on the ground? U.S. troops aren't actually fighting, but they're training these forces, um, and it just goes on with barely any notice.
Our guest today is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. He's one of my favorite journalists. He does really significant and fantastic work across various different geopolitical topics. He is the news editor and a columnist for antiwar.com, where he's worked since 2018. And he also hosts the daily show Anti-War News with Dave DeCamp, which is like a quick, very concise one-stop shop for all of your foreign policy news. And today we're going to talk about, among other things, his work on Somalia, which, as I mentioned, is something that is incredibly undercovered. So, I mean, it's really something that I've only really seen Dave cover in the United States. And there's been some significant updates on this. So the U.S. launches multiple airstrikes during 2-week campaign against ISIS affiliate in Somalia. Now, this is something that, Dave, you and I talked about when you were here a few weeks ago when I was guest hosting for Jimmy as well. U.S. Africa Command said in a press release on Monday that its forces had launched, quote unquote, multiple airstrikes as part of a 2-week operation against the ISIS affiliate in Somalia's northeastern Puntland region that concluded on August 23rd. Quote, operations consisted of targeted strikes against ISIS leadership safe havens in the Golis Mountains. The command said, offering no other details about the strikes. Quote, specific details about the operation will not be released in order to ensure operation security, end quote. They love those hiding behind the national security or operations security for sure. AFRICOM said that the operation was launched, quote, in coordination with the federal government of Somalia, end quote, but the U.S.-backed Mogadishu-based government doesn't control Puntland, and the U.S. military backs local forces on the ground in the campaign against the ISIS affiliate, which is an offshoot of al-Shabaab. An ex-account for the Puntland counterterrorism operations has announced a series of operations against ISIS fighters in the mountains in recent weeks, claiming to have captured caves the militants were using as hideouts. Now, that was a few days ago. Then there's also been a very significant update, I think just the day after this, and this is something that you have to kind of constantly contact the State Department on to try to get information. They're always very vague with you and don't really like to divulge too much information, but AFRICOM told you that they had launched 9 airstrikes in operation against Somalia's ISIS affiliate, which brings the total of airstrikes in Somalia this year to 68. Previous record was 63, also held by a one Donald J. Trump. So he has now broken his own record for U.S. Annual airstrikes in Somalia. So, Dave, give us, just for the people who maybe missed your last appearance on here, give us a little bit of the backstory about what's happening right now in Somalia.
Yeah, well, I mean, this war goes back a few decades. The U.S. has been intervening in Somalia since the 1990s in this specific way, after the end of the Cold War. And just for a quick background of this current war, this is part of after 9/11. The Bush administration turned its sights on Somalia as part of the terror wars. And one of the things they did in 2006 was they backed an Ethiopian invasion, which kicked out a government that was very briefly in power in Mogadishu, the Islamic Courts Union. They took power from all these CIA-backed warlords that were, the U.S. would give money to root out so-called, terrorists and everything. So the Islamic Courts Union took power. Ethiopia knocked them out. And then kind of the radical offshoot of the Islamic Courts Union was al-Shabaab, and their first recorded attack was in 2007 against Ethiopian troops occupying Mogadishu. So it's important to understand where they came from. And then, of course, the U.S. kind of supported operations against them and helped install the current government that's based. I always call them the Mogadishu-based government, the government in Mogadishu, because you look at the map in Somalia, they control very little territory. They're really propped up by the U.S. It's very similar to the war in Afghanistan in a way, the war against the Taliban. The U.S. spent all this money propping up this government, and as soon as the U.S. left.
Nope. I think we lost Dave's audio. We lost your audio, Dave.
Oh, okay.
Oh, no, you're back now.
I'm back. Okay. Yep. Sorry.
Man, this is a fun show.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So what was I saying there? So
very similar to Afghanistan.
Yeah, this government, it's a very weak government that the U.S. is propping up. So anyway, so over the years, the U.S. has launched airstrikes against al-Shabaab. In about 2015, some al-Shabaab guys went up north to Puntland and started this new ISIS affiliate. And I believe there's some foreign fighters among the ranks, but it's really just a few hundred guys who are, and this is one of those cases. We see this across the region where the U.S. intervenes. These other groups pop up, and then, we got to bomb them too. So that's the case here. And when it comes to this recent 2-week campaign where the U.S. launched 9 airstrikes, this is the ISIS affiliate they're targeting. But at the same time, they're also supporting the government against al-Shabaab, and the government has, over the past year, lost a lot of territory. They're losing support among the clans that have helped them fight al-Shabaab over the past few years. So the Trump administration decided to go through with a major escalation of the support and bombing campaign. And this is why we see these huge numbers. And one thing that Trump did when he first came in to office was he essentially loosened the rules of engagement, giving lower level military officers the power to conduct airstrikes and raids outside of areas that they consider combat zones, which is anywhere outside of Iraq and Syria. And the result has been these massive airstrikes. So the way I cover it, because I am trying to get attention on it, I saw you covered it on your show, which I appreciate. Like, doesn't that seem significant that Trump has just broken a record for most airstrikes in Somalia in a single year? And nobody's even talking about it. We're not debating, should we escalate this war that we're involved in, where there are U.S. troops on the ground? U.S. troops aren't actually fighting, but they're training these forces. And it just goes on with barely any notice. And it was the same thing in the first administration. Trump broke his own record. So yeah, again, that headline, like, Trump shatters the record for most U.S. airstrikes in Somalia. It just seems like a significant story to me. But besides, you and a few people I know, like, it didn't get picked up anywhere. And we have, we're a relatively small outlet, but sometimes bigger places pick up our stories, and this is original reporting, and not just,
well, that's something I kind of wanted to ask you about, because it is very strange to me that this, and I realize it's maybe not as flashy as what's happening in the Middle East. I realize maybe it's not as flashy as what's happening with Russia and Ukraine, but this is very significant. And as you said, this is something that has been going on for a really long time and really has never gotten a lot of coverage. Why? Why do you think that is? Because it seems like, this is significant. He just broke the record for airstrikes in a year, and it's August. Like, it's just now the end of August. So we still have 4 months left in the year, and he's already demolished that. And so it seems as if, as you just said, that people should be covering it. And I don't know if maybe people just haven't noticed your reporting on it. I just commented on Twitter a couple of days ago. Somebody mentioned something about you on, I think it was maybe Sabby Sab's Twitter page. And I was like, yeah, frankly, I can't believe people aren't banging Dave's door down to have him on to talk about Somalia. Like, this is a wild story nobody's really talking about. So what do you think, as somebody who's been in journalism for a while, why is this not getting any coverage?
I think it's just a part of the world. I guess people don't really care about the Horn of Africa. I mean, a lot of the conflicts in Africa in general don't really get much attention. I mean, especially Sudan right now. And for us, I mean, if you look at antiwar.com, we have a lower part of our page where we have kind of news links from other sites from, all over the place. But in general, like, Sudan hasn't made our top stories very often, because what we focus on is the wars and interventions that our government is involved in. But this, there's just, I think in people's minds, there's just always kind of war in Somalia. Everybody has this, I think Black Hawk Down, the movie with the Dave Matthews song in it. I remember, like, I think that had a big impact on our generation's view of Somalia. It's just like, these kind of,
they're at war again.
They're always fighting. Yeah. And then you hear about it, like, airstrikes, drone strikes, like, no U.S. troops are dying. So people just don't care. But yeah, it is kind of like, I don't know. I mean, I don't really know exactly how to explain it. And one thing, another thing I'm trying to do here is, like, get, the journalists with the big news org that have the resources to, like, try to figure out what's happening on the ground. I mean, I have very limited information to work with. So we don't know if civilians are being killed in these strikes. We just simply don't know.
Yeah, that's another thing I wanted to ask you about, because they are, and you have such a difficult time getting any information from them at all. They're really vague in anything that they say. They don't, and they always hide behind, as I said, they always hide behind operation security, national security, whatever it is. That's always something that they like to hide behind in order to, keep information from getting to people. But we really have no idea, right? How many casualties, civilian casualties there are. We really have no idea what's actually going on, other than that you have discovered that they've been pretty open about the number of airstrikes, but we really have no idea what damage has been done and what lives have been lost, right?
Yeah, no, we really don't know. At one point, the White House claimed they've killed over 100 terrorists in Somalia. But yeah, we really don't know. And another factor is the government. I know they've clamped down on journalists. And I don't know much about Puntland. We don't know anything about this military force that the U.S. is supporting in Puntland against ISIS. And that's a very rural area. Like, they're fighting in caves and rural mountains. So I doubt there probably isn't many, if any, civilian casualties there. Although I did see that they're saying that there was women and children, with them.
Yeah.
So again, we don't really know. And I bet the U.S. doesn't know. The AFRICOM might have an idea. But this is all being, I think they're relying on, again, this very corrupt government in the South, and then the Puntland forces, I really don't know much about. So yeah, it's really hard to know what's actually happening on the ground. And again, even like, I had somebody message me, oh, well, I see it's just, they're just targeting ISIS. So why is that bad? And again, just the context here of U.S. intervention in Somalia, how much of a disaster
it always is.
The fact that escalating a war, like, there should be a debate about it, a conversation about it. This shouldn't just be something that goes on and people just kind of, if they hear about it, which most people, I would say, like, the majority, if you like polled Americans, I would be curious to see what percentage are even aware of this air war. And,
I bet it's tiny.
Yeah.
Tiny.
So, yeah, I mean, it's just frustrating. Like, it is literally, there's no other media outlet. Like, Stars and Stripes, some of the military focused ones, once in a while, they'll have an update and be like, whoa, we launched all these airstrikes in Somalia. But that's really about it when it comes to like print stories about it. But that is really it.
Yeah. And it's really disappointing to see that a lot of independent media hasn't even picked it up either. And I think that, it's very clear that U.S. involvement, U.S. Interference never ends up well. And this is just another example of it. And I think that that's probably a great deal of why we don't see it covered very much, because they don't want people to be aware of what's going on, because they don't want people to be against it. They don't want to have to deal with that confrontation of people not supporting what they're doing. So they'd rather just do it and not talk about it. And then nobody's any the wiser, and they can just get away with it. And I think that's probably a great deal to do with it. But this is going to continue to unfold. Unfortunately, again, we are only in August. So they're probably going to be, it's very likely at the rate that they're going to end up around 100 airstrikes at this point, right? That's probably about where we're at mathematically.
Yeah, that would be about my guess if things don't change. And it seems like they're escalating. They're like pushing these new offensives in both parts, in both.
Come see me on tour in Edmonton, Calgary, Vancouver, Appleton, Wisconsin, Rosemont, Illinois, Chicago, Louisville, Fort Wayne, Indiana, Hermosa Beach, Sacramento, San Francisco. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets.